Great. Let's get online like it's 1989. Okay. So these slides were kind of hastily thrown together because there's really just so much to cover here. You would think that there maybe wouldn't be because I specifically chose a date where we would not be on the internet, right? So this should be good. Anyway, we're going to do a little bit of time travel. We're going to go forward and backward in time a little bit. There's sort of a little bit of a narrative where I like to fake you out a lot, so forgive me in advance that we're going to travel forward in time and then back in time and that sort of a thing. A brief bit about me and a gentle shill before we get started. I run this thing called Bloop Museum. It's inside of another computer museum called the System Source Computer Museum. We're actually trying to move here to Pittsburgh. So if anyone wants to see something that looks a whole lot like the retro area that everyone's playing games in back there, except in a 40,000 square foot building about 15 minutes from here, I would really love it if you would support my museum. I have a very easy way for you to do that. You can whip out your phone and scan this screen, and I'll leave this up here for a second. I'll tell you a couple things that we do. One is that I own 14,000 video games. You can come to the museum and actually check them out and try them on real hardware. Another thing that we do is archival and preservation. We had a visit with some lawyers and a floppy disk that the FBI apparently would not touch, and we recovered data, and they exonerated 2 people. Using the data, so that's another thing. And we're also a destination where you can bring your own data and try to get it preserved, whether it's disks or even chips. We had a guy that had a Montgomery Ward CyberVision 2001, if anyone even knows what that computer is. I sure didn't before he showed up with it, but we backed up the BIOS, and now they're working on an emulator for it, so that's pretty cool. So really what I want is just kind of a community spot that has a lot of retro. We're open most of the year, and you can kind of come anytime. I basically live at my museum, so if you want a tour at like 7 p.m. on a Sunday night, I'm willing to give you a tour. So enough about my museum. I want to tell you a little bit about my online past and some other people's online pasts that I learned about while I was making this presentation. I have been online for probably the majority of the services that you'll see in this video, and even ran a BBS back in the day. So I feel at least slightly qualified to talk about this. Before we get started, if I can just get a gentle moment of silence, there are 2 very important people that just passed away. We have the You've Got Mail guy, and we also have the inventor of BBSs. And actually, this isn't going to be a moment of silence. We're going to play Ode to Internet. It's funny that this is called Ode to Internet because it's really just a modem connection handshake. Audio, let's make sure it works. And we're not getting audio. Oh. The top comment on this says that the applause from the audience means that the handshake successfully, they connected to the audience. And the funny thing is that the audience applause is also white noise, which is kind of what that sounds like. Okay, why don't I just jump into a little bit of talk about modems first. Giving people tours through the museum, people are like, oh my God, like it's a parent and like a 9-year-old kid that doesn't understand that, It used to take time to, like we'd have to wade through busy signals and all sorts of things to get online, and then we've got to wait for our modem to connect, and oh my God, it was so terrible, right? But if you haven't actually sat down and thought about what your modem is going through when it's trying to connect to the other world, and I say going through, but actually it is probably going through quite a lot. Check this out. The funny thing is if you have a cable modem or you have Fios, or literally every time, I shouldn't say every time, every first time you connect to anyone's Wi-Fi, your modems are doing the exact same thing. In fact, if you look at the way an old 56K modem communicates with the other end, you'll notice that it's actually using FSK and PSK. And if you dig deep enough in your Wi-Fi settings, if you haven't already, you'll notice that your wireless modem does the same thing. So it's kind of interesting that we thought that we got rid of this, but no, it's kind of still there. Just because I'm currently obsessed in this presentation with giving people connect noises from different modems, you're going to get that. But now we're going to give you a speed comparison so that you can see just how slow we started. Shout outs to the dude that put this video together. This is one of my favorites. Also, I have closed captioning on, I think. Oh, no it isn't. Hold on. The closed captions are easily part of my favorite thing about this video. Let's try this again. Also, over here, you get to see how fast text is displayed at this speed. So keep your eyes on the computer. After this one, check it out. He upgraded his gear because 56K doesn't work very well over modems, emulators, and simulators. He's simulating phone service in the middle here. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so in the beginning, hey, next slide. Come on, computer. In the beginning, we had these networks, right? We're not talking about modems here. I mean, look at this, it's 56K, but then you need to kind of go over here and look at the year for a second. 1986, NSFNet, that's National Science Foundation, had a node at UPitt. Sorry, it wasn't here. But interesting, they had these things called fuzzballs. Some of you might have one at home. Okay, so we have this network called NSFNet. There are some other networks, right? Everyone blames ARPANET for being the internet back in the day. Here are some ARPANET nodes. Utah just gets its own node. Actually, this might be University of Utah. I've never done the research here, so I could be wrong. But University of Utah did a lot of early 3D research and interesting computer research stuff. But, oh, hey, CMU joins the ARPANET very early on. This is December 1970. All communications are at least 50 kilobits. Okay, great. 18 nodes, 24 lines. Here's another network that I wanted to give a shout out to. A lot of people don't pay attention to AlohaNet. This was online in 1971. Most of these were developed far earlier than that, but not actually in action or anything like that. AlohaNet is an early wireless packet network. I believe 9600 baud is what they eventually settled out at. I loved reading the spec for this because the initial spec for AlohaNet is, as soon as you have data, say something. And if you hear someone else saying some data, there has been a collision. Make sure you try again later. That's the end of the spec. Anyway, this is just kind of interesting. Eventually, we have all of these networks, right? And there's this guy, Vint. And Vint invents TCP/IP and says, hey, we're going to use this protocol. Does anyone want to get on? Maybe if we get kind of interconnected these networks, we could call it some sort of internet. I think I've heard of that before. So here are some acoustic couplers. You could get one that just, here's a serial port, microphone, speaker. You just pick up your phone, dial someone else's computer, and then drop your phone on here. And then all of that closed captioning stuff happens into this phone. And your computer, once it works through all of the closed captions, handshakes with the other end. Actually, it's just this modem, and it's just going to change those bits into things that it can poop over the serial port. Fantastic. You might also get the portable version. This one's for a Tandy 100 or a 102. Those were kind of the earliest, I guess you could call them like reporter laptops. They're in a slab format. They were really popular for like reporting scores from the games and that sort of a thing. I went to Revision this year and I talked about acoustic couplers. And one of the guys at my presentation, you can't go to Europe and talk about the demo scene. Hey, have you heard about this thing called the demo scene at Revision? That's the most stupid thing I could have done. So I was like, hey, have you heard about how we figured out that the demo scene existed in the US? And I told them about that, and one of the guys is like, oh, you called this an acoustic coupler? We didn't call it that. And I was like, really? Well, didn't you just use whatever you would say in German, like, akustische something or other, right? And he's like, no, we called them data toilets. Because they look like chairs. So this is your data toilet, whoever that was that told me that. I found this through Google image search, just like everything else that you're seeing in this presentation. Here's a picture of Ward Christensen. Rest in peace. He's the guy, CBBS could have been Computer BBS, it could have been Chicago BBS, it could have been Christensen BBS, but he and one other guy just decided to accidentally on purpose leave their computer online, hooked up to the phone line, and just see if anyone would call it. And they did. It's amazing. They would use one of these. Some people even had stacks of these. Actually, you could stack your Hayes modem onto a clock that looks like a modem because I guess they had extra shells to sell. You could also get one of these US Robotics 3Com. Actually, they broke off from 3Com again, and they're just US Robotics again. I learned that when trying to work out a legal question back in the day. Anyway, you get all of these modems. And what are you going to get online with that many modems? A lot of people look at this and they're like, okay, multi-node BBS maybe. How about this many nodes? So this is the Apache 3D Realms BBS that they ran back in the day. And after reading a little bit more about this, apparently they had a T3 going in here just for the BBSs at one point. So crazy amount of, you'd get something called a slick that would break out your lines from a T1, and you get your own, basically phone service to some guy's master bedroom, apparently. Let's go further back in time again. Sorry about the time dilation, this happens. Here's a Hayes Micromodem 100. Here's one of the first modems. Notice that there are just some pins up in the corner. There's no phone jack. Your phone in the US doesn't have a phone plug. You can't actually get your own phone until about 1981, 1982, when the phone company decides to start standardizing on phone jacks. Before that, your phone is borrowed from the phone company, just like they'd rent you a DSL modem. Your phone would come with your phone service. So if you're ever watching like an old movie and like, they can't pay the utilities or whatever, and the phone guy like comes and takes away their phone, and you're like, man, that's really rude. That's actually what would happen back then because the phone was owned by the phone company. But eventually we get some phone jacks and we get something like this, my beloved TI chipset modem. Down here are some jumpers. You want to make sure that those exist on your modem too. Otherwise, you might have a WIN modem, which is just a sound card with a phone jack. Or you have a plug-and-play modem that's changing serial ports on you all the time, and your COM software doesn't know how to talk to it. This way you can force your modem to be COM2 or COM3 or whatever it is that you wanted it to be. Here's the You've Got Mail guy. I'm sorry, he just passed away, Eugene. Eventually, we end up with 56K modems. Actually, Lincoln handed me, we might have forgotten to just bring it along in the car, but he's got one in black that's the X2 version of this, and he recapped it with this extra big cap because it probably blew up in a thunderstorm, I think. So around that time, we're getting online, on the internet, on the web, right? The web is largely credited for maybe 1994, but Mosaic comes out in 1993. The web is in prototype stages before that. It's 1989, actually, that I believe that World Wide Web, all one word with capital W's, actually starts to exist, and Tim is testing this out at CERN. But we don't actually get to see a website or his next cube that says, don't turn this off, it's a server, or any of that stuff, until much later. But here's you can see here's a version of Mosaic from 94. So we need to go back in time some more, right, to figure out how we can get online. So here's Gopher. Gopher would probably be the #1 contender for a World Wide Web-like thing. This comes out in 1991. You would use something like, you can't search Gopher. Don't worry about searching. You don't need to be able to search. You need a separate program to search. So you probably use something like WAIS, Wide Area Information Search, or Service, rather, sorry. That comes out in 1990. Wait a minute, that predates Gopher. That's because WAIS can actually just search various things on the internet. So you have these sources here, and you would go out to sources and type in what you want to search for, and it would be like, oh, well, you could find this on the internet here, or here, or here. You could also get these interesting things called books. And I literally found one at the museum. I was going to take a picture of it. I have a book with literally every IP address that was on the internet at a certain point in time, or at least every subnet. Anyone that had a subnet, it was like, CMU was on the internet. Here's their IP block that we leased them, whatever. And it's not just internet addresses. You can find NSFnet stuff in there and all sorts of other stuff. Other search engines were Veronica and Jughead, not quite as popular as WAIS, but I did use Veronica back in the day. So there's another thing, FTP. Holy shit, now we're back in 1971. Finally, this is something that we can use in 1989. We might even be able to use Archie to find some files that we could download with FTP if we're lucky. The big problem with this is that until you get something like Xarchie, which has a very similar interface to what you saw in the previous screenshot with WAIS, you'd be using this sort of text mode thing, and you'd be like, all right, I want to search for Kuala Lumpur, and it'd be like, okay, well, there are 11 searches ahead of you. It's going to take about 3 minutes. Eventually, this is sort of cheating. Obviously, this is someone's like Windows 10 screenshot or whatever. Downloaded at 2 gigs a second. Of course, it was a 2K file or something. But the point is that, okay, are we FTPing back in the day? No, everyone's playing around on this in 1989, right? Wrong. AOL doesn't really exist until 1989. So this would be a screenshot of more what AOL would look like in 92, 93, something like that. Lincoln mentioned the endless September when AOL finally connects to the internet. and unleashes an entourage of people who have no idea what the internet is onto the internet. So AOL doesn't look like this. In fact, AOL didn't look like this for me because I have some bad news, probably just for myself. I had this horrible childhood where I was always behind on video cards. So here's actually something interesting. Anyone ever played this Neverwinter Nights game? They probably played the one from, like the 90s or 2000s, but there's actually, look at this, copyright AOL. This is an online MMO that you could play if you had AOL service. But back to my video card thing, this is what it would look like if your computer was good. This is what it looked like for me. So I was stuck with CGA, color graphics adapter, which basically means you get synthwave colors, cyan, magenta, black, and white. You can also get barf colors like the 70s or 60s, green, yellow, brown, red, those sort of colors or whatever. And you can change the palette a little bit, but that's about it. And here we have apparently some people having a marriage in an MMO in the 90s. Pretty cool. All right, I can get down with this. Here's what AOL would look like for me back in the day. I really, really just disliked Windows 3.1. And I discovered a couple application switchers that would basically let me multitask DOS programs, and I much preferred that. Quarterdeck made a good one. There was another one called Software Carousel, and you could literally like alt space between all of your DOS programs running at the same time. And when I ran a BBS, I would just, like kind of the equivalent of alt tabbing out to play a game. But I could also do that with AOL. But the other cool thing is that I could just be on AOL for DOS, which is what this is, and open a DOS shell while I'm downloading something on AOL. So that's kind of convenient. This looks like garbage because it's not actually Windows. It's something called GeoWorks. Do I have anyone with autism in the room? Because I certainly probably am on the spectrum. You probably already figured that out yet. So here's AOL inside of something called GeoWorks. GeoWorks is a Windows competitor. And if we go back in time, there's this thing called Geos, which is the predecessor to GeoWorks. So here's GeoWorks over here. And you can play Solitaire or Tetris, anything that you would do in Windows, right? And over here we have Geos, where we have GeoPaint and GeoWrite. This is Windows for the Commodore 64. And here's the Geos disk when you buy it. And if you just kind of turn it over, oh, hey, look, there's this thing called Quantum Link. You want to get online in 1986, maybe you'd use Quantum Link. And actually, you wouldn't use Quantum Link. This was sort of through Quantum Link, but here's something called Habitat. Anyone played, I saw someone playing Monkey Island on the Amiga back there earlier, but there's also Maniac Mansion, a whole bunch of these point-and-click adventure games. Habitat uses the Maniac Mansion engine and turns it into an MMO in 1986. Well, in Fresno, we used to watch the dryers spin at the laundromat. Before Habitat came around, of course. Yeah, that's definitely what I did back in the day. Habitat wouldn't do very well. I mean, it did well at the beginning, but then it kind of starts, popularity tapers off a little bit. We run into Club Caribe. They basically just retooled it into something that would come with Quantum Link. Okay, I mean, that's a cool idea. Your online service comes with an MMO. Welcome to the Newbie Club. You start seeing interesting costumes here. You see the library. They have actually some pretty cool, they would run like special events, that sort of a thing. But as with all people on the spectrum, I had to go further down the rabbit hole. And I discovered that there's a Habitat 2. Habitat got licensed to Fujitsu. And I literally found this picture last night when Soji was giving his talk and talked about NiftyServe. Here's a NiftyServe sticker on Habitat from Fujitsu. And it even existed, you could get on SegaNet, the Sega Saturn internet thing, and get on Habitat 2 with that. Over here, someone used the Windows Mac thing. Here's another wedding. What is it with people getting married, except this is a furry wedding or something. But, I mean, no hate. I'm just, it's a little bit weird having a military pig and a chef panda be my, anyway, whatever, forget it. Here's Quantum Link. Back in the actual purpose of this talk is to tell you what it was like to be online in 1989. You could maybe do Quantum Link by then. This would actually be more in the mid-'80s. And Quantum Link looks eerily like something else. These guys got started in 1985, if you want to go back to 1984. Hey, look, it's PlayNet. I wonder where they got the idea for these, Yeah, so PlayNet is something that got picked up and turned into Quantum Link. And if you want to watch, does anyone know, I mean, obviously everyone knows like Mother Goose and all of the nursery rhymes and that sort of thing. Does anyone know Mixed Up Mother Goose? It's totally like, we accidentally just took all of the nursery rhymes and everything and we mishmashed them and, now like suddenly Cinderella sat on a wall and cracked her head instead of Humpty Dumpty or something. Anyway, the point is that if you really want to get a great education into what things were like back in the day, I'm actually going to throw a shout out for *Halt and Catch Fire*, the TV show, which is literally the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but actually it's not that the names have been changed, it's just that the wrong person is like associated with one service or the other or that sort of a thing. And you get to see some stuff like this. So Quantum Link would let you play games. Here it is over here. Here's literally an AOL chat room on a Commodore 64 back in the day, actually Quantum Link. This is where it all starts. But I need to tell you about another service because I wouldn't have a Commodore 64, I would have a PC, and I would want to know, what is the Prodigy service? Because my dad called me up and said, for your birthday or Christmas, maybe it was, I'm going to get you online with I had a compact portable at the time, again, with CGA. I would literally use the TV out of my compact so I could get 16 colors and Sierra games. And you could do all sorts of things on Prodigy, right? So what can you do on Prodigy? Here's the login screen. You could actually do some like Carmen Sandiego stuff on Prodigy. Here's JCPenney trying to sell you a boombox. But it gets kind of crazy at this point. All of these things that we think are new, everything old is new again. Is DoorDash new? Is Instacart new? Here is Grocery Express on Prodigy in the 80s. Someone literally ordering groceries in like Seattle in the 80s. Wild. Here's someone booking some plane tickets. I know someone in the audience that does that all the time. Check this out. Someone's playing a game on Prodigy, right? And it looks pretty good. They're drawing these with vectors. And they got a car ad right in the middle of playing a game in the 80s. Everything old is new again. This was recorded in 1992. This is possible in the 80s for people to deliver you ads. Just what everyone wanted to know, right? Let's go back in time a little bit more. Videotex, notice there's no year here because this is a general term, right? The Trash 80, or actually this is a Coco down here, but they did have this available for the regular Trash 80 series. Videotex is literally just a generic term for we're going to get your computer online onto some sort of commercial proprietary service. So various people would run different Videotex-like services. Minitel or Teletel are kind of some of the ones that get the most credit, and I'll show you some of that. But Byte Magazine did a whole big Let's Dream About Videotex issue where they would just wax about the future forever. Here's one, CFAX. This is considered Videotel, but this is actually only one-way communications. So they would give you numbers. Basically, they would say, if you want to know more about such and such service, check out CFAX page 392 or something like that. And you type 392 into this little TV set-top box or whatever, and on a loop, thousands or maybe at least hundreds of pages full of text, public access looking stuff like this right here, would just be constantly broadcast quickly and whatever. How are you going to look at 1,000 pages every couple seconds? You're not. You're going to tell that TV box to stop on page 392. So it waits like 3, 5, something like that seconds, and this finally comes up. Or this is page 224, or page 298, sorry. Here's another example. This is a little bit more interactive. You call up France Telecom, the French phone company, and you say, hey, I want to be on Minitel. And one of these little boys shows up on your front stoop, and you hook it up to the phone line. It already knows who to call. It is, in fact, itself a computer, not a very good one, and you wouldn't be running any software on it anytime soon, but it'll at least get you online. You can play with makeup. You can do all of the, DoorDashy, ordering food online, do your banking, whatever. It's even, most of the time, it's in black and white, but it's eventually in color. This is pretty wild, again, for 1982. Bildschirm texts. I probably just murdered that, sorry, Germans. BTX is basically, it's German video text, or German Minitel. Even the Germans hate it, so it must not be very good. But you do see some interesting sort of graphics mixed with text going on here. At least there's plenty of color, literally a page about color. A little rainbow down here. Cute. Okay. Japan even had their own sort of version of this through NTT Data, which conveniently, with the aforementioned person I mentioned who books plane tickets all the time, I went to Japan. And the first thing you do when you get off of an airplane is turn on your phone and check for texts and whatever. And so I turn on my phone straight off of the plane, and I get a text message from T-Mo, welcome to Japan. Your phone calls are 20 cents a minute. Data and texting is free. Congratulations, happy birthday, whatever. But then I notice up at the top, my phone is connected to NTT Data. So this is just a phone company, right, a data service. But back in the day, what they were all about doing was connecting businesses, like connecting banks to each other. It was based, NTT, does everyone know what AT&T stands for? American Telephone and Telegraph. NTT is Nippon Telephone and Telegraph. They're basically the AT&T of Japan, but they're trying to connect businesses, banks. They had a whole credit card terminal service, all of this stuff. And eventually, obviously, became, who my cell phone carrier was for the 2 weeks I was in Japan. But they also, so not a whole lot of consumer access, but I dug around and I found this, and I'm rather fond of these things called video games. And I discovered that there's a Super Nintendo and a Famicom modem with literally a game controller with a number pad and whatever, and there's even standalone terminals. We found one in Japan at a toy store. I think they thought it was like a kid's toy computer. It was $3. It turned out to be actually like the business access terminal that folds up and looks like a laptop and fits in like a businessman's briefcase. So what do you do with it? Off-track horse betting. This is the biggest thing that you can do with this. Maybe it's not the biggest thing, and it's definitely not the only thing, but off-track horse betting and racing in general and betting on races seems to be like one of the biggest, huge things that would happen in the late 80s, early 90s on, there's literally these cartridges you see. These are literally off-track horse betting Super Famicom cartridges that you drop in, and you get the horse racing game, and you bet on your horse. Wild. Okay, let's get back to the US for a second. In 1984, you can have a precursor to IRC. This is called the Versadial or D-Dial. The one right here is from my buddy DJ's Diversidial that still runs down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So that's a cool thing that you can look up. It's literally just, you throw like 8 modems inside of an Apple II, if you can believe that that's even possible. And everyone just gets online and chats. It's fun. But what would we really be doing? Well, it certainly wouldn't be this. But since the first room that you enter when you currently go to the museum is a room full of DEC and HP and that sort of a thing, I thought I would throw one quick thing in here for the mid-'80s. This is actually possible back in the day. Did you know that this is generated in text mode here on the left? It's a cute snake, by the way. But it would actually probably look more like this tiger on the right, because you'd probably have a, like a VT220 or VT320 Thanks to Dr. Claw back here, I now have several. I cleaned out his attic, and we're going to set them up in the museum and have them run various terminal things. So the DEC terminals have these things called Sixels. It's originally designed so that you could print dot matrix art to the printer, but then the terminals support it too. So you can look at graphics and send it out to the printer in text mode. It's very weird. There were a whole bunch of like Git pull requests and whatever for people to implement Sixels into like terminal packages recently and whatever. Everyone's kind of getting obsessed with this. Apparently, you can animate and play movies in your like VT100 terminal and stuff now. Thanks. That's autism. So like here is another thing. Oh wait, I'm getting a little bit ahead of the 80s again. In 1992, I was very excited for RipTerm. This was vector graphics over the modem, and some of these are really good. You see here, it's ACID. They're not trying to convince you to drop ACID. I know you're at a demo party, but if you go over here, ICE, ACID and ICE, shout outs to Blocktronics and the 16 Color crew. You got to see a little bit of, this was not a very popular year for ANSI art here at Demo Splash. If you go a couple of years back in the results, there was a year where they had a huge reunion here and there were like 30 ANSIs submitted and whatever, but these guys eventually got into the RipTerm scene. So RipTerm would be supported by BBSs, but only a couple of them. So we have to go back in time. I discovered this while I was looking up RipTerm. This is something new to me that I had no idea existed before yesterday. Interactive graphics and sound. If you had an Atari ST, again, thanks to Dr. Claw, I now have 9. But you had this online interactive graphics and sound BBS thing where online you could get graphics as cool as this and sound to go with it and animation and play games on a BBS. Also pretty cool. I'm probably going to have to set this up at the museum soon. So if anyone knows a little bit about this, I've seen a few of this things about this posted on the Blocktronics Facebook group or whatever, but I'd like to get an IGS BBS set up. Here's what we actually sat around looking at back in the day, some ANSI art. Welcome to Fantasy Island. Take the 9600 baud plunge into adult BBS entertainment, and you probably need 9600 baud for that too. Preferably 28.8 or 56K because you're not downloading, bikini pictures or whatever at any speed. I'll go ahead and embarrass myself with a story where I downloaded a bikini picture at like 2400 baud when I was 11, and it's like 100K. And 1K over 2400 baud takes about 4 seconds. So 100K takes 400 seconds. So imagine, 10-year-old me sitting around waiting for a bikini picture for 400 seconds. Kind of a letdown. And also, most of the BBSs would limit the amount of time you had per day. So you'd have like 20, 30 minutes. Maybe if you were friends with the sysop, you'd get an hour or something like that. And that's the only way I got access to the bikini pictures in the first place, actually, is because I learned where my caps lock was and turned it off. Then everyone thought I was like 18 or 19 all of a sudden. I download this bikini picture at 2400 baud, and that was a dumb first download. I should have just gone and downloaded some games. I would later call long distance to download some games from Florida. I needed the Commander Keen CGA version, which was only 4 colors, and the Florida BBS was the only one that had it, and then I got in trouble with my mom. But anyway, here are some other BBSs. You can see some cute little ANSIs. These are all BBS ads. I was going to insert my own BBS ad in there, but it felt a little bit like a shill. Don't call any of these phone numbers. They probably won't answer. Probably get someone's cell phone and they'd be like, why are you calling me with your computer? Oh, and one last thing. Check this out. This guy has 60 whole megs for his BBS. So, 40 megs here. People are really excited to have hard drives at all because it turns out a lot of these BBSs can just be run off of a floppy disk. Who knew? So, what would it look like when you dial in? Here's a couple examples of some BBSs. I tried to go for different platforms just so that you could see what it looked like on different platforms, but here's a system. This is a shout out to anyone from Baltimore that's watching. I used to call this, and I've learned that there's some interesting sort of anthropology going on. This is a BBS called WIV, but some people, I mean, I for the longest time would call it World War IV, WWIV would be another, like, but everyone in the Baltimore scene, and there are like 7 BBSs that all ran this in Baltimore, and they all call it WIV. So apparently I've got to call it WIV. And here it is, Celestial Happenings. I think they were going for Celestial Happenings. Anyway, 301, you know. So here are some other image BBS, and like you log in and you get to do all of the same things that everyone else does on the internet these days. You can read email, you can send email, you can delete emails. That's an IT crowd reference. You can chat with the sysop. Literally, the person that has the computer that's running this, you just hit C, and their computer starts beeping, and the person runs over because they think something's wrong, and it turns out it's just like, Joe whoever wants to talk to you, and so then you just blow your 20 minutes a day that you have to call into this computer talking to the person that runs the computer. Hey, where's your computer? What kind of computer is it? Do you have a hard drive? What's it like running a BBS? How do I know that people ask these questions? Because 1, I ask these questions, and 2, I was asked these questions when I was 11 running my own BBS. And that's when you tell people your home address, and your mom wonders why there are like 50 and 60-year-old people showing up to see their, like 12-year-old son. And it'd be like, Brendan, why is this guy at our front door, and why did he bring his whole family? And so I had to tell my mom that these were people that I talked to every day or every other day, and like we've been friends for probably about 2 years, and they've been calling my computer, and that sort of a thing. Anyway. So here's what it looks like on the back end, just because this is kind of interesting to some folks. You get stuff like, the BBS just kind of sits there and tells you how many people call in, how many emails, how many posts this would be for message boards, how many new users, if you got some new files, if people downloaded some files, maybe your hard drive's filling up, you need to know that you need to clear off some hard drive space here. A bunch of different BBSs have all sorts of different things. Wildcat here literally has a button for a sysop login so that you can log in with like super user access on your board. Once you're logged in, what would you be doing? Well, I sure talked about downloading files a lot, so I thought I'd make a slide for that. Here is a whole bunch of file sections. Check it out. These guys even have a file section specifically for Epic Mega Games. Anyone ever heard of them? They're actually just called Epic Games now, I hear. They made something called Unreal, Oh yeah, Epic Pinball, one of my favorites. And demo scene related, actually. If you go down here, someone's trying to download Rise of the Triad. I actually had this in a previous slide deck that I gave a demo scene talk at Hope. You can see that they're getting 1612 characters per second, so they're probably on a 14.4 modem, and they're getting a nice transfer rate on this. They probably have compression. Over here, just another file section up here. Down here is wild and crazy. I just had to put the slide in because I found it and I think it's wild. This is someone on an Amiga using a Telnet client to download something with Z modem at approximately 12K a second, so they're probably doing it over a serial link. And they're downloading a Commodore 64 disk image. There is a story here. If I stole your image off of Google Image Search and this is you and you're watching this presentation now, please send me an email and tell me what the hell is going on here. Because like if you had to telnet into something to download a Commodore 64 disk image on an Amiga, anyway. I'm going to stop talking about that. Door games is another thing you would do on a BBS. Here is Trade Wars 2002. Here is Barren Realms Elite. Here is Legend of the Red Dragon. Here is Global War. These are all really popular door games that you would play back in the day. RPG, sci-fi, basically a fancy version of Risk down here. All very cool games, and they were all multiplayer, and many of them turn-based. So you log into the BBS, you say, hey, I want to play some doors. You pick your game, you play a little bit of the game, you get bounced back to the BBS. And, like you finish your turn, or you could even have multiple turns. Perhaps you would disconnect 10 minutes into your call. You still have 10 minutes left, to call back later and check your email or play a little bit more of the door game. And then you call back the next day. And most of these door games would have a script that you would run like at midnight or something like that, that would execute everyone's turn in order or something like that, or just do it on the way out. Here's another thing you would do. This is sort of weird, but your communications package, which is really just a dumb terminal, like, kind of like SSHing into something or whatever, is basically what your terminal program does to get you on a BBS. But you would have external programs that you could run. So you call up a BBS and you want to download all of your message board posts for the day, so that you don't literally sit on the BBS wasting all 30 minutes of your time posting messages and whatever. So you could get something called a quick reader and download all of the messages from the BBS in one go and hand it to your quick reader, and then just reply offline and then call back, 5 minutes later or however long it takes you to, flame more people, and then upload things and, all sorts of stuff, teen issues, Star Trek, computer games, but this isn't the only thing you would do. You could actually also literally, your download protocol, which would be the program, literally a program designed to download things. Z-modem would be really popular back in the day. Your like Procom or Telex or whatever would come with X-modem and Y-modem built in. But if the version of your comm software is too old, you don't have Z-modem, which is probably the best like error protection, good download protocol, that sort of a thing, supports multiple files. So you'd get Z-modem the program, and you'd tell your communications program, hey, whenever you see like RZ or SC, it's expecting to receive or download a file, and it would trigger this external program. So this wouldn't be something that you would run offline. This is something that you'd run online while your comms program is online. And you could also run games. So now we're back into running something called VGA Planets, which is a door game, but it's not a door game that you can see while you're playing around in Procom or whatever program you're using. Instead, you literally do the same thing. You set this up as like a download protocol, and VGA Planets would send out a string that tells your comm software, hey, go out and start VGA Planets, and then you get this cool game. So these are just like a bunch of the wild ways that I would be online. I actually ran a board back in the day where I did a whole bunch of this, and some of these, I didn't even know about, like IGS, but I thought that this would be kind of a good intro into, if you actually get stuck in a time machine someday and you end up in 1985 or whatever, discover a DeLorean sitting on the side of the road, you can still actually have some fun going back to this era and getting online, and you can, spam and troll people just like you do now on the internet. You just have to do it in text mode. That's the end of this. Do I have time for questions? What time is it? I hit my hour like almost right on the nose, but yeah, you can ask in person. I'll be sitting right over there. You can ask me on Discord. If anyone has a burning question, you can shout it out right now while I'm disconnecting.
And there's a piece of good news. Bloop has already gotten a donation from someone at Demo Splash. So thank you, Colin, for your donation.
Fantastic,
to
thank
Bloop
you.
Museum.
Help me move here, and you'll actually there are several local entities that have talked to local and remote that have talked to us about partnering specifically with online services in mind. They want to set up like SSH tunnels to our phone system and all sorts of stuff so that you can literally sit in the museum and dial up a BBS in another area or just across town or that sort of a thing. So that'll be a lot of fun. So we'll have a fake phone system that you can get online and hear busy signals and make video calls and stuff like that. So thank you for listening. Stay tuned for what's next.
Text mode demos. So we are
Awesome.
going to have text mode demos and move on to modern Windows demos.
Cool.
Yeah.